One of the things that we want to do with this Substack is talk to interesting people about interesting things. And we have a very interesting person to talk to about very interesting things.
We're excited. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly joined us for a conversation about
how the government is sort of falling apart from our perspective, but also his insider perspective on that. And it sheds light that I actually haven't heard to date. So I hope you enjoy listening to this. And also, as you listen, please make sure to comment. We're going to read every comment that is made on our Substack, and we want to hear your input and your direction for our future conversations. So you're a valuable member of this conversation.
Let's launch this thing.
Did you do that on purpose? Did you? Senator Mark Kelly is an astronaut, so she's making a joke about launching because he's a former astronaut, captain of the space shuttle. We're going to do a lot of that kind of punny stuff?
Probably.
Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you guys doing? Emily, we've met, have we?
We have not. Nice to meet you.
Where are you guys?
We're in Santa Barbara today.
Nice.
Yes.
In a bad spot.
It's not a bad spot. If we turned around, we have quite a pretty backdrop here. You have a very colorful backdrop too.
My office, yeah.
It looks very senatorial.
Sort of. I go to Santa Barbara for New Year's, actually.
Oh, really?
Every year?
Last few years we've gone, yeah.
Well,
Sounds
I think
fun.
we might be here. We might have to say hi in person.
Yeah, we'll come crash your party.
People crash.
Great.
They're very low key.
Great, because we didn't have New Year's plans, so this works out nicely.
Right. Maybe I should get rid of my jacket. I don't know. What do you think?
This is up to you. Both
Yeah.
versions look good. We didn't wear our
I know. I
formal attire, so apologize for that.
go put on a suit coat. Well, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, it's good to be here.
You know, I think that a lot of us feel like the sky is falling with this constant barrage of whittling away of what seemed like constitutional assurances and certainly norms within the federal government. Is the sky falling? Are the checks and balances still working from your
I would say the sky is lowering. Lowering at a steady pace. A lot of the stuff that he has done is not constitutional, in violation of the law. I mean, the president's the amount of just corruption and grift, the amount of money flowing into his personal accounts and the accounts of his family is unprecedented. Yeah, they talk all the time. They keep pointing to Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden got on the board of a company, which, by the way, I think was a bad idea. Shouldn't happen on on Burisma, right? Should have never happened. Family members of presidents, unless he or somebody like him had like some expertise in that area and had some connection. But in that wasn't the case. But what this president does with his family, meme coins and stable coins and making deals with other governments that then buy into, make investments into that stable coin, real estate deals. Other presidents don't get to do that. They don't do fundraisers in the White House and thank you dinners for political supporters. That's unethical.
Right. I mean, we see all of those things happening, but I guess my question are there mechanisms for accountability for these these are constitutional violations?
There absolutely was. And that is having an independent Department of Justice,
Right.
independent from the president. That's not what we have anymore. Department of Justice historically has been independent from the president, makes the decisions on their own, keeps people accountable, and works to make sure we have a country that supports the rule of law and that the rule of law matters. And we have inspectors general across government agencies. We have ethics officials, lawyers in the White House that'll tell presidents and speak truth to power. People hire attorneys that, hey, tell me when I'm about to do something that's against the law. We're not going to do that. This president doesn't have that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the comfort we took and what we took for granted, like the bedrock of these systems and the checks and balances that were, in place that we counted on. But it feels more fragile, I think, than we thought it was, which is
Yeah,
just,
our founding fathers, they knew at some point in our country's history we would be challenged by a guy like this that would be in violation of, principles. And he's trying to undermine the Congress. We're the Article One branch of government. We come before the presidency and the Constitution, and president doesn't care about that, and he's taking steps to just undermine the power of Congress.
part of what it seems like we're in these days is just this tsunami of information of one crisis and violation after another. I recently finished reading your book Enough on your personal story with
Yeah.
Gabby around gun violence and really thinking about that kind of moderate, middle of the road things most Americans could agree on as common sense legislation that helps everybody. I was thinking about you having spent so much of your time on that issue around gun violence and safety, and now things are coming at us so quickly. It just feels like we're buried. As soon as you pick something to dig into, there's another thing in front of you. And our attention spans are just so diminished with this onslaught of what's happening in the world. And I guess, my question to you is, how are you thinking about that? How are you thinking about where to invest your time and energy when any one of these issues could take all of the efforts you possibly could muster to do good in your role as senator?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you, Emily. It's really hard.
Yeah.
It is like every week it's like a tsunami of additional stuff, and you got to react to it. Some of it, there's some of it maybe we can do something about, though it's really hard when Democrats don't have the House or the Senate. If we win one of those chambers back, this gets a lot more straightforward and easier. So it's trying to figure out where you can put some pressure to have, some kind of a positive outcome. But every, week it's a new thing to try to deal with. So you try to go after the stuff that is urgent and consequential. You don't want to focus the stuff that's not urgent and not consequential. So you don't
How
be
much of that?
There's a lot of that. You don't want to be distracted by the bullshit that doesn't matter. And I'm trying to think of an example, like, the president does some stuff and it's like, do we really want to spend any time, reacting to that thing? At the end of the day, that's not what matters. What matters is, some of these awful judges that he's putting in place, or he's taking away people's rights, destroying their health care in favor of giving big giant tax cuts to rich people. That's what that's why we had this shutdown. That's what this is all about, is that they prioritized extending the 2017 tax cuts, where most of that tax cut goes to the wealthiest Americans. It adds $4 trillion to the debt, and they didn't want that number to be higher. So how did you keep that number at 4 trillion instead of 6 trillion or 7 trillion? You kick a bunch of people off of Medicaid, and you get rid of these ACA tax credits, these subsidies that people have on their premiums. And when you do that, when you get rid of those, the estimate is 2 million people lose their health insurance. Some of those people will die because of it. Others will go bankrupt. So that's something we need to focus on, because that has real consequences to real people. I've spoken to a lot of these people. Tell me these horrible stories about where they might wind up when these new premiums kick in December or in January.
Yeah, and it's not just new premiums for people who can't afford it. It's hospitals closing down in rural areas.
Oh, just wait. 2 years from now, after the Medicaid cuts really kick in, rural hospitals across the country, many of them will have to close. And other hospitals, maybe they don't close, but maybe they get rid of the OBGYN clinic. And maybe that mom, who's planning on having a birth in that hospital close to home, has to drive 3 hours. And by the way, if she has a complicated pregnancy, maybe that baby doesn't survive.
It's hard. The consequences are sometimes down the road from the legislation. So it can be challenging to correctly associate things when it's not, instant,
immediate.
immediate.
Yeah. I mean, most stuff that we do here is not immediate. Takes time.
Right.
And often people can't connect the dots because they're busy.
Right.
They're working two jobs, trying to get their kids to school, trying to put food on the table and pay rent. They don't always see the connection that there were people that voted for this guy and then voted for those House members and senators, gave this president the trifecta, White House, House, and Senate. And because of that, his top priority, extend these tax cuts. Oh, it's really expensive. Let me just kick a bunch of poor people off of their health care.
You just going back to Emily's point for a second, and that question of how you focus your attention, like what issues are urgent and important to you. And you also have to make personal decisions around that. As a senator, you are somebody who actually has your hands on some very important levers of power and can make a real big impact. So making those choices has a big impact on a lot of people. You have spent a lot of your political career focusing on sensible gun control, as we call it. But then you pick other areas of focus. You've been focusing on AI for America, your new initiative, trying to develop a strategy for the whole country about how we are collectively going to deal with the major changes that AI is going to be bringing down the pipe. How do you come to that? How do you come to the decisions that you make around what it is that you're really going to focus on?
Yeah, I would say I think about these maybe like you put these things in like three different buckets. The one bucket is things that maybe I don't have a personal connection with, but have huge impacts on the future of the country. Certainly, healthcare policy is one of those, tax policy. Artificial intelligence, it's going to affect people's finances, their jobs, it's going to affect energy, um, semiconductor manufacturing, the economy, national security. Then I would put in another bucket is maybe stuff that you have like personal experience with. And some of these buckets are going to overlap a little bit. Personal experience for me, gun violence, as you mentioned. Gabby gets shot in the head. I start an organization with my wife and a few other people to deal with this issue. This scourge on our country makes us stand out as a nation in the worst of ways. We're the only developed country that has anywhere close to this kind of gun violence. We get over 100,000 people every year shot and killed in the United States of America. You know what that number is in Japan?
No.
It's not 1,000. It's not 100. It's like 3 people. Or in the UK, it's like 50 or 100 people. And for us, it's over 100,000. I mean, so that kind of falls into that category also because of my military and background and my space background. And where the overlap is I serve on the Armed Services and the Intelligence Committee. So a lot of the stuff that I focus on has to do with the military and the intelligence community. So I kind of think of them as like three separate things. You mentioned artificial intelligence. The reason I'm focused on that now is, well, after I got here, it was around the time after a couple of years, ChatGPT comes out and everybody realizes, oh, this has finally sort of arrived. Now we got to get Congress focused on it. So we had a lot of hearings and we had one big giant hearing that had like Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Sam Altman from ChatGPT, had like 20 people. And then nothing happened. So I'm like, well, somebody's got to do something on this, because if we just put this thing on autopilot, we could wind up with 12 million Americans out of jobs because of AI by the end of the decade, in 5 years. 12 million unemployed people. And then we could have a utility cost skyrocket because of the amount of energy. Right now, data centers consume about 6% of the country's energy. That's going to go up to 12% here, I think, by the end of the decade. So we got to fix the grid. We could, if we do it in a smart way, we could have these data centers be a net positive to the grid instead of a negative, where we don't have enough extra capacity and rates go up. But if you build it right, and you make them be able to put power on the grid. Let's say there's power outages because of natural disasters, but they installed all this battery capacity. So there's things we could do to make that a positive. And then there are things we can do to retrain people for new jobs, some jobs that we might not even know exist or will exist. So that's one of the reasons I've been, focused on this AI, because I believe in technology and I believe in innovation and the history of our country. It's grown our economy. It's made lives better for people. And I think AI can be that if we put in the necessary guardrails, if we allow the innovators to innovate, but we just don't just stand back and wait until we've got a problem on our hands. We want to get ahead of problems.
Yeah. The sun has risen.
See that.
We are now blinded, so I'm going to draw the curtain.
You know what we do? You want to know what we do on the space shuttle?
Yes.
Because we always know the sun is rising and setting every 45 minutes. Once around the planet in 90 minutes, you get a sunrise and a sunset. Whenever we do stuff on camera, interviews, we put up sunshades in all the windows, make sure there's no light leakage at all, because you're going to get that unfiltered, sun right in your face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Inevitable.
Well, so that's interesting. I mean, reading your proposal, your AI for America proposal, there's so much in there that just felt like, of course we need to do those things. Of course we should be paying attention to transparency and collecting good data and paying attention to environmental impacts of these big data centers and thinking about, not fueling more income inequality in America and retaining innovation and promoting, of course we should do all of these things. But I wonder, in so much of the work that you've done is about that, sort of this old school now, middle, moderate, come together, come to the compromise of all the best ideas and move progress forward. And I wonder what you think about America's appetite at the moment for some of that. It's not inflammatory. There's no heroes and villains. It's sort of everybody roll up your sleeves and let's see if we can do a good thing for everybody. And in reading it, I just was thinking about that. Have we lost our appetite altogether? If I can't get my pitchfork out and go to war with the other side over something, how do we engage us as a nation again in the togetherness of good common sense progress? And this was, there's so many pieces in what we're facing with AI that we really need to do that with.
Yeah, I think the appetite for bipartisanship and working together across the aisle is a lot more evident among the people that actually work here in Washington, and I think it's state legislatures as well across the country, than what people perceive it is. And sure, we're polarized. There's a lot of partisanship here. Maybe it's more polarized than it's been in, century and a half. But the perception from people who watch what happens in Washington, D.C., I think they think it's a lot more divisive and polarized than it actually is, and that we actually work together. I'll give you an example. I had somebody, a pretty sophisticated person that, that I would have thought understood, how Washington works, and said to me, this is probably about a year ago, said to me, "Do you ever see Ted Cruz when you're in Washington?" And I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much every day." Then she said, "Yeah, but you don't ever talk to him, do you?" I said, "Yeah, pretty much every day." I'm actually friends with Ted Cruz. Now, Ted Cruz and I are on different islands with regards to a lot of different policies. We also come together and pass legislation and work together on things we agree upon. And I'm very friendly with him. And this person was shocked that I could actually be friends with Ted Cruz. And I'm friends with most of I'd say all the Republican members of the Senate. I talk to them all the time. We get along. We go out. We do stuff outside of work together. Maybe not as much as we should, and we try to work together. And then sometimes we get bogged down in things we don't agree on, and a lot of the fight, spills out into public, and we try to make our points, and it can look a little combative. But I think the American people don't see the times when we work together and that we're actually friends with each other. And I think a lot of people try to mirror what they think the behavior is here. And that's really on us. I mean, we have to do a better job of showing to the American people that this place can work, and it does on a, on a weekly basis on issues that they don't ever generally hear about because the press doesn't cover it. I mean, the press, they're businesses and they're going to cover stuff that's more controversial. I get that. So I think it's on us to try to demonstrate that this place it does work at times, and we've got an organization that can function, and Democrats and Republicans can work together.
That's encouraging.
That is, yeah. I'm shocked to hear a bit of encouraging news here. I think that some of the things that you outlined for the near possible future of 12 million jobs lost by 2030 and a doubling of the amount of power that's drawn from the grid by these data centers, those are not the apocalyptic forecasts. Those are quite, reasonable, measured predictions.
Yeah. AI does not work, even though it's called artificial intelligence. Intelligence implies like the human brain. AI models are nothing like the human brain. It doesn't work the same way. I mean, we store data. You have like memories, and you remember things from that history class you took. Especially if it was you heard it like in the seventh grade, the ninth grade, the 11th grade. Now it's like in there like a computer has memory, but that's not how AI works. AI is a complicated, math and a bunch of numbers that tries to most accurately predict what the next word will be. Here's the good news on AI. I think that, and I may have said this earlier, that every time we've, had major innovations like this, we have grown the economy, we've created more jobs, we've made lives better for the American people. That this could be the same thing here. We just got to figure out how to best do that.
Also, every time there's been a major technological innovation in the United States, typically it's involved the U.S. government and usually the U.S. military, computers, the internet, GPS. All of these major innovations actually came from the government or public-private partnerships. And it seems like the federal government for the last 5 years has kind of been abdicating on the AI front and being like, you tech giants figure it out. We'll just stand back and watch. But to actually make a concerted effort to shepherd this process forward in a way that actually serves the country and the people is super important.
Well, the tech giants want that. They want like no government involvement unless it comes with a check, to fund their thing. And they don't want any government regulation. And I'm not generally in favor of a lot of government regulation. It's one of the reasons they were all in that room with the president last night, hey, let us do our thing because that results in profitability. And American people be damned. But that's not what I stand for. Yeah, I mean, we want to let the innovators innovate to some extent, but we've got to be looking out for workers. So that's why one of my partnerships on this is with the unions. To figure out how can we make sure that this technology is good for working people. If it's not, we don't need it.
You said something, I think it was maybe on Colbert recently, but you said if there's one thing we can all do to really make things better right now, it's to put down your phones, disconnect from social media, and try to have real conversations with real people.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
this will be on social media. So
Yeah.
Aside from this,
Also, I just picked up my phone to look to see what my next thing was, which by the way happens to be a AI meeting with a guy from Carnegie Mellon University.
Perfect. Well, we don't want to keep you from it. But I do think, there's something. So we have between us 5 kids, and we talk a lot about social media and phones and this amazing ecosystem where we can all be in our own unique ecosystem of information that's completely different from the next person's because there's so much of it. And it creates this real bizarre dystopic reality when it comes
I think
to
it rewires your brain too.
So anyway,
I'll ask you guys a question. I recently started asking parents, and you don't have to answer the question. Well, I'll put you on the spot. but I've recently started asking some parents, would you rather your teenage kids use social media or cigarettes? And you'd be shocked by how many say cigarettes.
Honestly, you're my
Minute.
gut response is like, cigarettes. Like, probably AI will figure out lung cancer in the next 20 years. Maybe just go for cigarettes.
How long, Senator? How long?
How many packs a day?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What a not funny at all, actual real
Yeah.
problem we have on our hands. And
Yeah.
anyway, nice sentiment that you had there of
Yeah, well, I hate to end on that one.
Yeah.
Well, next time, have me back on.
Senator Mark Kelly recommends
Yeah,
children
yeah.
start smoking.
I
That's
do
the
not.
takeaway.
I recommend they don't smoke and they don't use social media until they're 20 years old.
Yeah, cheers to that. If that. I mean, it's bad for us too, I'll be honest. Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with us this morning, and thank you for all the work you're doing. And
We're looking
appreciate you.
How about
forward to.
have me back on and we'll talk about Ukraine.
All right.
Yes,
sounds
that would
good.
be great. Thank
Right.
you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
We had 2 cameras. We only pressed record on one.
What do you think?
What, is it usable? I think it's totally usable. We have 1 camera. One long, unedited cut of us rambling incoherently, I think, is exactly what people wanted.
I think we had some coherency in there.
Well, speak for yourself.
It's also a lot hotter than it was at 7 o'clock in the
I
morning.
know, this room is really heated up.
What were you saying? Something good.
I was
I'm
saying
sure.
something about the World Series.
Oh, yeah.
I actually think that a lot. I mean, don't you sometimes reflect on what the fuck is it about human beings that we want to go to sporting events so much? Like, what is it about seeing 2 groups of people fight it out in an arena that somehow seem? I mean, it goes back to
We like
Incan
to cheer
and
for
Mayan
our team.
times and to ancient Greeks. Like, this is something
Right.
that has happened around the world. It is part of human nature. I think that it is actually part of our wiring and it is designed to help prep us for military engagement. It's like a primer for war. And so when people go to the World Series, there's nobody who's like there and doesn't pick a side. There's nobody like, I don't know, I like them both. I want them both to win. That's not what you see. You see people who pick a side. And we do the same thing in politics. And it becomes really difficult for people to see beyond this 2-side paradigm.
There always has to be an other side. I mean, it used to be, in some moments of history, it was America versus.
Right.
So we had this unity based on an external threat.
Right.
Or perceived threat. But now we've eat your own.
Turned on ourselves.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that some of what I hold the belief that some of what we see in partisanship is actually part of our sort of natural wiring being exploited to nefarious ends. I think that that was a bit of a tangent, and I apologize.
Yeah, I liked it.
I wish we got to talk more about AI.
Yeah. That it's a long proposal he's put together.
We read this
22-page.
that was quite extensive and a bit wonky. And I would have loved to actually discuss the details about it a little more. Maybe we can get him back to have a
I'm
deeper
sure we
conversation
could.
about that.
Whatever the next, if there's
Especially
a next step,
if that
moves
actually
forward.
moves forward, because the government does need to be doing something about AI, and it's very strange that they haven't gotten their shit together to be involved
Scary.
in this evolution.
Yeah. There was one thing he said he and Gabby wrote a book about her journey and also their journey into gun reform. And there was one thing he said when he testified for the first time to a Senate committee which was like part of his entrance into the Senate and politics. But he said something to the effect of, this issue is incredibly complex. In this case, they were talking about gun safety, but that's no excuse for inaction. And I was like, oh, that's actually, you could apply that to any number of things. But in particular, AI, I think, there's a lot of people are dabbling in little bits of AI, whether that's ChatGPT or help with, homework or writing things, or just on their phone, kind of voice commands. And there's then these like huge pieces that are happening, but it does seem complicated and overwhelming and hard to understand. But also, that's no excuse, because the consequences of not being involved and paying attention and figuring it out are potentially catastrophic.
Right. I mean, that's never stopped our government before.
Right.
Right.
That's true.
I mean, we figured out nuclear fission and fusion, hydrogen bombs. We figured out how to build computers, electronic computers, and microprocessors like that. The federal government was involved in that. The federal government developed the internet, and all of the most complicated things in our lives, they were a part of that. And now they
Not
seem
really.
to be...
Except for selling those microchips, which is...
Oh yeah, we're selling microchips
that I wanted to ask
to
him
China,
about.
you mean?
Yeah.
And to the Middle East.
Right. That I really wanted to ask about.
Right.
That was one of those, I forget which podcast it was. Maybe Hard Fork? I'm not sure. But that's one of those like, oh, that sounds really...
Like a really bad
we
idea.
might be really screwed.
Right.
And I wanted to ask the senator about that, but we didn't have time. Next time.
Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for
Misha.
taking the time to put on the same clothes that you had on
Your
earlier in
haircut
the
looks
day.
great.
Thank you very much.
You know that.
I know it does. I know the haircut looks pretty good. I can see myself in the screen here, and it's hard to take my eyes off.
And I think
We got there.
that's enough.